right, everybody, so let's talk about pollinators. Now, what exactly is a pollinator? Well, a pollinator is anything that will take pollen from one flower to another flower. So that could be anything, right? Think about it. Any creature, insect, animal, anything that can move a pollen from one flower to another is technically a pollinator. Okay, now that we know what pollinators are, what are the types of pollinators that you can think of right off the bat? Number one, bees. Of course, bees. Two, butterflies. You're right, butterflies. Three, birds. Good. Four, bats. I know you wouldn't think of a bat, right? But we'll come back to bats in a minute. Five, beetles. Now, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you think of like a ladybug, ladybug's a beetle. Ladybugs are always in flowers. So if a ladybug is moving from one flower to another, hey, it's pollinating, right? And number six is humans, because we can pollinate also. So these right here are the 6 pollinators. So as you can see, there's a lot of pollinators that are out there. But why are they important? Let's tackle that one right now. Now that we know what pollinators are and types of pollinators, let's talk about why they're important. Well, without pollinators, there would be no fruit. There would be no vegetables. There would honestly be no flowers. So pollinators are important because they transfer pollen to other flowers, which makes those flowers then do a process called germination, which makes the flower or the vegetable grow, or the fruit grow. So imagine not having any apples, or any carrots, or any cucumbers, or green beans, or bananas. Imagine that, right? But without pollinators, we would have none of that. None of those fruits and vegetables and flowers would be here. So pollinators are super, super important. Let's talk about the different types of pollinators and how they pollinate. Okay, so the first 2 types of pollinators we talked about were bees and butterflies, correct? Bees and butterflies. Here's some examples right here of bees and butterflies. Now, let's talk about bees real quick. Bumblebees and honeybees do the best job at pollinating, right? They go around, they hit all the flowers. As you can see in that little clip at the very beginning of this video, the bumblebee was in the flower, rooting around, trying to get all that pollen on it. Now, when bees get covered in pollen, they look like this right here. Pretty crazy, right? Just covered in pollen. But that's what they need, because when that bee goes to another flower, some of that pollen's gonna fall off and then pollinate that new flower. So honeybees and bumblebees, super important. Now a bumblebee is that big fat little black and yellow furry fellow. They are super non-aggressive. Like, they don't want to bother you at all. All they want to do is find pollen and go home, nothing else. Now a honeybee is kind of the same way. Super laid back, chilling, just wants to do its job and go home. But a honeybee, if you mess with it, it will sting you. Now the sad thing about a honeybee is when it stings you, it dies. So when that bee stings you, you have to understand that it was so scared that it was willing to risk its life to get away. Bees, we should just leave alone. You know what I mean? Give them their space. They just want to play in the flowers and then go home. Nothing else. Okay, let's talk about butterflies. Butterflies are the same way, except they're not going to sting you, obviously. But butterflies just want to float around, chill, go on the current, hit a flower, get some food, and move on. But when that butterfly hits a flower, it's also pollinating, because it'll go from that flower to the next flower. So butterflies are super important too, and they're super pretty. So we want to leave butterflies and bees alone. Now let's talk about wasps really quick. Wasps are no fun. They do have a purpose in the garden, but it's not necessarily for pollinating. Big wasps, definitely stay away. They're aggressive and they want to sting. So let's just stay away from wasps. Okay, so that's the first 2 types of pollinators, right? That we discussed, bees and butterflies. Now, let's talk about the next 2 types. We ready? Let's do it. Okay, now obviously this is a fake owl. And this owl has a purpose in this garden. It's to scare off birds, because birds are scared of owls. because owls can technically eat them. But birds and bats are both very important pollinators, and I'm going to tell you how. Okay, so birds, unlike humans, when we eat something spicy and hot, it burns our mouth. Birds don't have that. So when they eat, let's say peppers, let's say red peppers or red tomatoes, there we go. So the color red attracts birds to your garden. And when they eat, say, a red pepper or a red tomato, and they eat those seeds into their bodies, well, when they're flying around and, you know, they potty, they're spreading those seeds everywhere. That is how they pollinate different plants, is they're spreading them around their area. Now, it's the exact same thing that bats do. Now, I know when you think of bats, you're like, ugh, bats. It's like a flying rat with wings, right? Well, it is. It's a flying mammal. But they're important to the ecosystem because they kill insects, all the mosquitoes. Imagine if there were no bats and there were mosquitoes just everywhere. It'd be even worse than it already is, right? So bats are important for insect control, but they're also important for pollinating the area because when they eat fruits, they also do the same thing that birds do. They eat the seeds and then they fly around, and when they go potty, they're spreading those seeds. Or when they're eating the fruit, they fly to another tree and they're eating that fruit and those seeds are dropping to the ground, they're pollinating that way also. So bats and birds, super important, but birds you don't want in your garden because, like I said, they're eating your fruit or your vegetables. That's not good. That's why I have the owl here to help. Okay, so we've talked about bees and butterflies, birds and bats. What are the last two? Beetles and humans. Let's do it. Okay, so I know when I say beetles, you're like, what? What's a beetle doing in a flower? But like I said earlier, ladybugs, as an example, are a type of beetle. And when the ladybugs are flying around and they go into a flower, sometimes they get covered in pollen. And then when that beetle or ladybug goes to another flower, they're doing the same thing that bees and everything else does, is they're transferring that pollen from one flower to another. So that's how beetles are important. Now, there are bad beetles. Let's be real. There are good beetles like ladybugs. You never kill a ladybug. Ladybugs are really, really helpful to your garden for more than just pollinating. But there are bad beetles, just like there are good insects and bad insects for your garden. Now, let's talk about humans. When we're in the garden and we're spreading seeds and we're planting, we're technically pollinating an area. When humans are pollinating areas, what we're normally doing is we're taking this little tiny toothbrush, think of a toothbrush, or like a little tiny paintbrush, right? And in areas that don't have a lot of bees for whatever reason, or pollinators, we can take that little brush from one flower, get the pollen on it, into another flower. It's pollinating. Now, we are basically helping nature do its job. But that is how humans can also pollinate flowers and vegetables. Very, 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 very important. Okay, kids, now we should absolutely know what pollinators are now by the end of this video. Again, let's recap. Pollinators are any animal or insect that moves pollen from one flower to another flower are pollinators. Why are they important? Without pollinators, we would have no fruits or vegetables or flowers. We've identified the 6 types of pollinators, which is right here, and we've discussed the importance of each of those pollinators. So I hope everyone has learned what a pollinator is, the importance of pollinators, and the different types of pollinators. If you have, then great. Now, hopefully in your next science class, or the next time in science this comes up, you'll raise your hand right away and be able to answer the questions. And give some examples that maybe your teacher wasn't expecting you to know. I hope you all learned something from this classroom series. I really enjoy doing these videos for you guys. If you can, leave a comment down below or have your parents do it and give me ideas of other videos that you all would like to see. Or let your teacher know, and the teacher can put a comment down below and I can do a video on that topic also. All right, everyone, keep learning, keep raising your hand, keep thirsting for knowledge, and hopefully you're getting out in the garden, you're getting dirt in your nails, and you're growing something. So until next time, shine bright and harvest hard. Bye. Super important. I hope everyone learned this. Nope, I've already said that, Chad. That's it. Okay. I think I have a bee above my head. Not sure. Perfect timing, right?